The home is supposed to be the safest place in the world, a place where nothing bad can reach you, where doors are locked, walls are trusted, and family means protection. But on one quiet December night, that belief was shattered inside the Brentwood home of legendary filmmaker Rob Reiner. What happened didn't involve a stranger. There was no break-in, no forced entry. Instead, the danger came from someone close, someone trusted, someone already inside. Rob Reiner spent decades telling us stories about love, family, and human connection. Stories that made audiences laugh, cry, and believe in the power of relationships. Yet behind closed doors, his own life was quietly unraveling. For years, Rob and his wife Michelle had been carrying a heavy burden. Their son, Nick Reiner, had long struggled with personal issues that weighed deeply on the entire family. Those struggles never fully disappeared. They lingered, growing more complicated with time. No one imagined how close things were to collapsing. Later, investigators would revisit comments Nick had made in the past, statements that seemed unsettling only in hindsight, words that suggested the warning signs weren't sudden. They had been there all along, quietly waiting beneath the surface. December 13th, 2025 began as a night meant to be joyful, warm, filled with holiday spirit. Earlier that evening, Rob and Michelle attended a Christmas party hosted by Conan O'Brien. The room was full of familiar faces, laughter, music, and celebration. But beneath the festive atmosphere, something felt off. Witnesses later told investigators that a heated argument erupted between Rob and Nick. It wasn't subtle. It wasn't private. Voices were raised. The tension instantly shifted the mood of the room. Guests grew quiet, exchanging uneasy looks as the argument escalated. Several people later described Nick's behavior as unsettling, not just emotional, but disturbing in a way that stayed with them long after the party ended. One guest told investigators that Nick had everyone on edge. Rob didn't back away. He didn't lose control. Instead, he faced the situation directly, trying to steady things and keep it from spiraling further. Michelle stayed right beside him the entire time, calm, united. When they eventually left the party, it wasn't dramatic. It didn't look rushed or chaotic. It looked like two parents choosing to handle something privately rather than let it explode in front of everyone. Later that same night, Rob spoke on the phone with Eric Idle. The tone of the conversation was light and upbeat. They talked about future creative plans, including the long-awaited Spinal Tap sequel. There was no hint of fear or stress in Rob's voice. He sounded hopeful, focused, and fully engaged with what lay ahead. But in quieter moments before that night, Rob had confided something deeply unsettling to a few close friends. He admitted that he was scared of his own son. It wasn't said in anger, it wasn't frustration, it was fear. Fear from a parent who felt helpless, watching behavior he could no longer control. And that fear would soon take on devastating meaning once they returned home later that night, because before sunrise, everything would change. In the early hours of December 14th, something devastating unfolded inside the Reiner home in Brentwood. The Los Angeles District Attorney's Office later confirmed the incident occurred before sunrise, though the exact moment could not be precisely determined. The neighborhood was quiet, still, asleep. Nothing seemed out of place from the outside. Hours passed with no alarms, no calls, no signs that anything was wrong. By mid-afternoon, concern turned into fear. Around 3:00 p.m., their daughter, Romy Reiner, who lived across the street, went to check on them. After repeated attempts to reach her parents failed. Phone calls went unanswered. Messages were never returned. The moment she entered the house, she knew something was terribly wrong. She immediately called for help. Paramedics and LAPD officers rushed to the scene. Inside the home, both Rob and Michelle were found unresponsive. Authorities quickly secured the house and launched a full-scale investigation, treating the situation as a serious domestic case from the very beginning. Almost immediately, one detail changed everything. There were no signs of forced entry, no broken doors, no shattered windows, no evidence that anyone had broken in. Everything was intact. That fact pointed investigators toward a chilling conclusion. Whoever was responsible did not force their way inside. They were already there, or they were welcomed in willingly. Neighbors were questioned, but no one reported hearing anything unusual during the night. No shouting, no struggle, no chaos. In a quiet Brentwood neighborhood where sound carries easily, that silence felt disturbing in itself. Investigators noted something else. Whoever moved through the home did so quietly and deliberately. There was no visible mess, no signs of a struggle, just controlled movement, the kind that comes from someone familiar with the space. As detectives began reconstructing the timeline, attention quickly turned to Nick Reiner. According to police records, Nick left the house shortly after the incident. He arrived at the Pierside Hotel in Santa Monica around 4 a.m. on December 14th. Hotel staff later told officers that his behavior appeared completely normal. He checked in calmly, spoke clearly, showed no visible signs of distress. No panic, no shaking, no confusion. After Nick checked out, investigators searched the hotel room. Inside, they reportedly found evidence that directly connected him to what had occurred at the Brentwood home. That single discovery placed him squarely inside the investigation's critical timeline. Nick didn't stay in one place long. Within hours, he was gone again, moving quickly as if he didn't want to remain anywhere for too long. Later that day, surveillance footage captured him at a gas station near Exposition Boulevard and Vermont Avenue. Cameras showed him walking in casually, grabbing a drink, paying, leaving without hesitation. He didn't appear rushed. He didn't appear nervous. Everything about his demeanor looked calm, controlled, ordinary. That calm stood in sharp contrast to what investigators believed had already happened. By around 9:15 p.m. on December 14th, police located Nick near Exposition Park, just the steps from the University of Southern California campus. Patrol cars surrounded the area in a tense but controlled operation, unfolding in front of bystanders. Nick didn't resist. He didn't run. He stayed quiet and followed every instruction officers gave him. Within minutes, he was taken into custody. No struggle, no dramatic scene, just silence and the sound of handcuffs locking into place. By the end of that night, investigators were no longer guessing. They were connecting dots, a heated argument, a silent home, no forced entry, a quick disappearance, a trail stretching from Brentwood to Santa Monica and beyond. Still, one question refused to fade. What actually happened inside that house? And that question would soon push the case into a much darker phase. Once the Brentwood home was secured, forensic teams moved in, methodical, precise, relentless. Every room was examined, every surface checked. Nothing was rushed, nothing was overlooked. With no security cameras inside the house and no clear timestamps, investigators had to rely on science to reconstruct what happened. temperature readings, physical indicators, microscopic traces, all of it pointed toward one critical question. When did Rob and Michelle Reiner lose their lives? To answer that, forensic experts focused on the body's natural responses after death: muscle stiffening, blood settling patterns. These signs help determine how much time has passed once the heart stops beating. And in this case, the results were chilling. The medical examiner concluded that both Rob and Michelle died in the early morning hours, nearly 12 hours before they were discovered. That timing aligned perfectly with what detectives already suspected based on movements, witness accounts, and Nick's whereabouts. The tragedy unfolded during the quietest part of the night, when the neighborhood was asleep, unaware that anything was wrong. That silence wasn't just eerie, it was key. Then investigators turned their attention to the injuries. Forensic specialists documented multiple sharp force injuries, a technical term used to describe wounds caused by a sharp-edged object. These were not accidental. They were not distant. They were delivered at close range, face to face, within arm's reach. The evidence showed repeated motion, sustained contact. What shocked investigators wasn't just the nature of the wounds, it was the number of them. The injuries revealed that it didn't end quickly, it went on longer than expected. Even seasoned forensic experts were disturbed by the intensity. This wasn't a single moment of chaos, it reflected continuation. From a legal perspective, repetition matters. Investigators don't interpret emotion, they interpret evidence, and the evidence suggested intent, a decision to continue rather than stop. Following those conclusions, Nick Reiner was formally charged with 2 counts of first-degree homicide, one for his father, one for his mother. In California, first-degree charges represent the most serious classification available, reserved for cases believed to involve deliberate action. But prosecutors went further. They added special circumstances due to multiple victims. That single decision elevated the case to the highest legal tier possible. With special circumstances attached, the potential consequences became extreme. If convicted, Nick could face life in prison without the possibility of parole, or the most severe penalty allowed under the law. The Los Angeles District Attorney's Office made it clear this was the strongest charge they could bring. They expressed full confidence in the forensic findings and the legal foundation behind the case. At that moment, the story officially shifted from tragedy to one of the most serious criminal cases the city had seen in years. And soon, Nick Reiner would face the court for the very first time. On the morning of December 17th, 2025, Nick Reiner was escorted into a Los Angeles courtroom for his initial hearing. Until that moment, the case had existed only through police statements, reports, and the speculation. Now it entered the public legal arena. The courtroom was tightly secured. No cameras, no live feed, no broadcast coverage of any kind. Only a small group of reporters, attorneys, and court officials were allowed inside. Those restrictions weren't accidental. They reflected just how serious this case had become. When Nick entered the courtroom, sheriff's deputies guided him straight to the defense table. The room fell silent. Every movement felt heavy. Every sound echoed. This wasn't a routine appearance. It was a turning point. Almost immediately, observers noticed what Nick was wearing: a suicide prevention smock, the kind used in high-risk custody situations. It was visible, unmistakable, yet no one acknowledged it. The judge didn't mention it. The attorneys said nothing. The hearing continued as if it wasn't there. That silence spoke louder than any comment could. As the session began, the charges were read aloud. 2 counts of first-degree homicide, one for his father, one for his mother. The language was cold, clinical, no emotion, no explanation. When the judge asked if Nick understood his rights, he answered briefly, calm, controlled. That was the only time he spoke. No plea was entered, no questions were asked. Nick sat motionless, eyes forward, expression flat, unreadable. The hearing then shifted to logistics. Nick's defense attorney requested the delay of the arraignment to allow more time before entering any plea. The judge agreed. A new court date was set for January 7th, 2026. The prosecution didn't object. There were no arguments, no confrontation, just procedure moving forward. As the hearing ended, Nick was escorted out the same way he came in. Silent, guarded. He didn't look toward the press. No statements were made by either side. Inside the courtroom, reporters whispered, trying to process what they had just witnessed. Minutes later, the room emptied, but outside those walls, attention exploded, and one question quickly took over the conversation. Who was paying for this defense? Legal insiders knew the reality. A case involving 2 first-degree homicide charges with special circumstances can stretch on for years. Expert witnesses, forensic reviews, endless pre-trial motions. The cost adds up fast. Estimates suggested that a defense of this scale could easily exceed $1 million before a trial even began. And Nick Reiner had no known income or active career that could explain how such a bill was being covered. That gap raised immediate speculation. Rumors spread quickly through media and legal circles. Some suggested that money connected to the Reiner family estate could be funding the defense. That possibility added yet another unsettling layer to a case already filled with them. And while none of that was addressed inside the courtroom, the debate outside was only beginning. As the legal process moved forward, attention slowly shifted backward, back into Nick Reiner's past, long before the courtroom, long before the headlines. Nick had spoken openly in the past about his childhood. He admitted that he never felt truly close to his father. He described an emotional distance that followed him growing up, a feeling of standing on the outside, watching connection happen without knowing how to step into it. Inside the home, laughter and shared moments existed, but for Nick, those moments never fully reached him. By most accounts, Rob Reiner was a devoted father, present, involved, committed to his family. He shared strong bonds with his other children through routines, interests, and time together. But with Nick, something never quite aligned. It wasn't neglect. It was an absence. Rob worked long hours like many parents, driven by responsibility and success. And without intention, emotional gaps formed. Nick later said he grew up surrounded by care, but that care didn't always land where he needed it most. That quiet isolation followed him into adolescence. Instead of feeling grounded at home, he began searching for belonging elsewhere, spaces that offered escape instead of structure. That search eventually led to substance use. What started small didn't stay small. By his mid-teens, his struggles had grown serious enough to require professional treatment. The family didn't hide it. They didn't deny it. They sought help repeatedly, treatment programs, therapists, second chances. Nick later admitted the substances were powerful, destructive. They pulled him into a cycle that became harder to escape over time. Moments of progress brought hope, Setbacks followed, breaking that hope again and again. Each time he seemed to regain his footing, the fall came harder. As he got older, stability slipped further away. Nick drifted across states, Maine, New Jersey, Texas. There was no clear direction, no lasting structure. These weren't fresh starts. They were survival stretches filled with uncertainty and chaos. Through all of it, Rob and Michelle never walked away. They stayed involved. They stayed present. They poured in everything they had: time, patience, love, resources, multiple treatment programs, constant check-ins, support every time he stumbled. They refused to give up on their son. At one point, Rob tried a different approach. He brought Nick into his world of filmmaking. In 2015, they worked together on a film called Being Charlie, a project drawn directly from Nick's own struggles. For a brief moment, things looked different. Nick had the structure, purpose, direction. People close to the family said he seemed steadier, more focused, like something was finally holding him in place, but that stability didn't last. Old patterns returned: distance, unpredictability, collapse. Each setback drained not only Nick, but everyone around him. Over time, concern turned into fear. It was no longer just about recovery, it was about safety. And by the time of that Christmas party, the tension between father and son was not new. It was years in the making. That argument wasn't random, it was a breaking point. In the days that followed, the family spoke only once. Through a joint message released by Romy and Jake Reiner, their words were not about legal arguments, not about speculation, not about blame. They spoke only of grief, of shock, of love. They asked for privacy, and after that, they went silent. No interviews, no public appearances, no statements beyond that single message. A private memorial was held. No cameras, no spectacle, just remembrance, connection, quiet reflection. Across Hollywood, tributes began to pour in, not only for Rob Reiner's work, but for who he was as a person: a steady presence, a trusted collaborator, someone who made others feel safe enough to create. Behind the scenes, the case continued to move forward. Detectives kept reviewing details. Attorneys refined strategies. Information not yet public circulated quietly among those closest to the investigation. Everyone involved understood the same truth. This case was far from over. From the prosecution's side, the message never changed. They remained firm that the evidence supported the most serious charges available. They pointed to the severity of what happened, to the timeline, to Nick's movements afterward. Because the case involved more than one victim, the legal options were already limited. If convicted, Nick Reiner faced only two possible outcomes: permanent incarceration with no chance of release, or the most extreme penalty the system allows. There were no reduced paths under these charges. It didn't get more serious than that. Meanwhile, discussions continued quietly within the extended family. Some sources suggested that not everyone was focused solely on punishment. Some hoped that mental health treatment would be part of whatever outcome came next. To them, this wasn't just a criminal case. It was the result of years of unresolved struggle finally exploding. Still, none of that was confirmed publicly. No filings, no sworn statements, only speculation outside the courtroom. Inside, the process remained cold and procedural. As weeks passed, attention returned to something Nick had said long before any of this reached the courts. Words that now carried a different weight. He had once admitted that he never felt truly close to his father. That emotional distance shaped how he saw himself inside the family. Those words, once overlooked, now felt impossible to ignore. The home that once looked stable from the outside had carried fractures no one fully saw, love mixed with guilt, hope mixed with disappointment, years of effort that never quite connected. And now 2 lives were gone. One son sat in custody, and a family was left shattered. The question remains, what do you believe really happened inside that house? Was this the tragic end of years of unresolved pain? Or is there more to the story that has yet to come to light? That answer now rests with the court and with time